Will we get an announcement about a new Doctor soon?
You will get an announcement. There's a press release lumbering through the BBC, which, as you know, is like the Jurassic period.
Yeah.
And 57 people have to sign off on every single word. So I promise you in about a week or 2 weeks, there'll be some sort of press release. And yet I can hear the gears slowing down even as I say that.
I know a lot of Doctor Who fans are grieving at the moment, but for me, I'm way past the grieving stage. I'm at the acceptance stage, and I have been for some time now. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and we're officially in the Wilderness Years Part 2. I called it a couple of months back, but we are now in the Wilderness Years Part 2. I was working overnight in Liverpool, and it was while I was driving back home today that the news dropped, which it kind of reminds me of my honeymoon, when me and my wife went away on our honeymoon, and then they announced that Ncuti Gatwa was cast as the Doctor. Basically, I should never ever go away. I should just live up to my expectations as a Doctor Who fan and just never go outside. So at the start of June, Russell T Davies, who has been on the promotional tour for his Channel 4 drama Tiptoe, he teased that there was a Doctor Who press announcement making its way through the BBC, and it finally dropped today. So on the official Doctor Who Twitter account, today we're announcing an update on plans for the future of Doctor Who. Read all about it on the Doctor Who website, and the link takes you to the official website. As part of securing the next phase of the show for future generations, and in line with the BBC's charter and agreement requirements, the BBC will put Doctor Who out to competitive tender this year. Doctor Who remains an important part of the BBC, and this tender underpins the BBC's continued commitment to Doctor Who, ensuring audiences will enjoy the show for years to come. After careful consideration, the BBC, Russell T Davies and Bad Wolf have collectively decided not to go ahead with the previously announced Doctor Who Christmas episode. This decision was not taken lightly, and we know it will be disappointing for fans, but in order to set the show up for future series, it was decided that rather than bridge the gap with a one-off special, we are choosing to push forward to invest in the long-term future of the show, which ensures that when the TARDIS lands once more, it does so in all of its glory. The previously announced new Doctor Who animation for CBeebies is currently in production. Details of the tender will be announced in due course. The BBC retains all IP in Doctor Who. BBC Studios will continue to lead the global distribution of Doctor Who, as well as licensing, consumer products, digital and immersive experiences on behalf of the BBC. We'll talk about what all of this means in a minute, but of course, in response to this press statement, people and organisations involved in Doctor Who have also been making their own announcements. Here's Bad Wolf TV on Instagram. It has been a joy and a privilege to have been at the helm of the TARDIS alongside the brilliant Russell T Davies. Doctor Who is and always will be a show that shines light into the darkness, and it has been an absolute honour to have been its torchbearer for 26 episodes with the BBC and Disney+. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through time and space, and most of all, thank you to the fans, Alonso. We also have Doctor Who casting director Andy Pryor, who we heard a few months ago had been stepping away from the series, but this is basically the formal announcement. It's the end of a long, happy and thrilling era. 196 episodes, 8 Doctors, anything between 10 to 30 companions depending on your definition, several thousand cast members, a figure that's pretty much impossible to be precise about. Thank you to each and every one of them, and the biggest thanks to my colleagues who invited me on board way back in when and became my great friends, Russell T Davies and Julie Gardner, not to mention the great years with Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall. You know, lovely statements on social media, lovely stuff. And then you get to Russell T Davies's public statement on Instagram. And so goodbye from me to Doctor Who, but hello to a big new future for the show, as the BBC announces it's putting the show out to tender. As a result, there won't be a Christmas special. We only cooked that up to guarantee a future when no one knew what would happen, but now we do know there's no need for it. You'll have to wait a bit longer for new Doctor Who, but you'll be waiting for more Doctor Who than a one-off, so it's worth it. For the record, there was no script. I never wrote it, and no actor was ever approached to play the next Doctor. You may disagree, fine, sit in that chair and wait to be proved right. You'll wait a long time. Now I'm as excited as anyone to see what comes next. Will they keep the theme tune? Will they lose the blue box? Will they bring back the Dravin? It's all up for grabs, which is so Doctor Who, exciting and unpredictable and new. Here comes the future of Warp. What a strangely passive-aggressive statement. It reads like that. You may disagree, fine, sit in that chair and wait to be... Like, genuinely, what on earth? I don't think that this is a very happy parting, because in the official statements, of course, it's all full of, like, BBC official technobabble, you know, as per the BBC Charter Agreement, a competitive standard, etc. But there's no, like, thank you to Russell T Davies, thank you to Bad Wolf. I don't think that this was a happy split, and honestly, it's one of the reasons why I think so much that has gone wrong over the past couple of years has gone wrong. So what does this mean? So much like shows, for example, like Blue Peter, the BBC will essentially put Doctor Who out there and allow other companies, other corporations to pitch their visions and pitch their ideas for Doctor Who, and the one that the BBC like the most, that's the one that they're going to go with. We saw the process for this unfold last year with the aforementioned upcoming Doctor Who animated series from CBeebies. Just to give you a sense of the time frame here, the BBC announced that they were taking pitches and submissions for this CBBC series in June 2025, and it was in December that year that they announced that Blue Zoo Animation Studios had won the pitch and that they would be producing the CBeebies series. And what's wild is that the BBC have effectively had to backtrack on saying, we're making a Christmas special for 2026, it's going to be Russell T Davies, and now they're having to effectively backtrack on that. And Russell T Davies saying that there was never a script, even though back in, I think it was February, Murray Gold was saying that there have been multiple scripts. Honestly, and, you know, not to give away too much of the game here, but, you know, I did hear something from a very reliable source about 3 weeks ago, and I talked about it in private with some other Doctor Who tubers who could maybe attest to this as well. But I heard from a source very close to Russell T Davies that not a single line of the script had been written. So it was kind of at that point I thought, okay, either it's going to get pushed back to Easter or it's just not happening at all. I had basically made my peace that this was not happening. My speculation, and of course I have to stress that this is just speculation, is that the BBC did fully intend to make a Christmas special for Doctor Who, written by Russell T Davies, but maybe Russell and Bad Wolf were just unable to bring forward a pitch or bring forward an idea that was viable to make in the time frame. They weren't able to secure David Tennant or Billy Piper. Maybe perhaps Russell T Davies was just like, I don't want to do it anymore, I just don't want to do it. Or perhaps the BBC looked at what Russell T Davies was offering and thought, if we broadcast this on Christmas, it will just further hurt the brand and it will further hurt the public perception of Doctor Who. We're not doing this because we value Doctor Who as a brand and we think it does have longevity, and this Christmas special will just hamper that longevity. We're pulling the plug. Personally, I'm inclined to believe the latter, because Doctor Who, personally, anecdotally, its reputation is in the toilet. I said up top that I had made my peace with this, and I honestly had made my peace with this from the broadcast of The Legend of Ruby Sunday. From that cliffhanger ending, to my friends and family's immediate reaction to that cliffhanger reveal of Sutekh, and just the idea that Russell had been promoting this new, fresh, brand new era of the show from Bad Wolf as a fresh start for a new audience, with a Disney Plus distribution deal for a brand new generation of people, and then you bring back Sutekh. Honestly, from that point on, in my eyes, Doctor Who was a dead show walking. However, a year later, when we get to the broadcast of the Interstellar Song Contest, and just the horrible political undertones and the morality of that story during the ongoing political climate, shall we say, it honestly just reinforced to me that not only was this a dead show walking, but that this current creative team at Bad Wolf and Russell T Davies and everyone else involved, they needed to go. I did not want to watch any more Doctor Who with this creative team at the helm. So for me, while I know a lot of fans are grieving, a lot of fans are upset at this announcement, for me, this is currently the best case scenario for Doctor Who. I don't want the Bad Wolf creative team to be involved in the show anymore. I think that Russell T Davies and the Bad Wolf enterprise over the past couple of years have done active harm to the brand. You know, I've told this story on live stream before, but after the broadcast of the Empire of Death, but between the broadcast of the Christmas special Joy to the World, I was working on 2 different film sets, and I'm wearing a TARDIS pin badge on my satchel, which I carry around with me at work. And on those 2 separate sets, 2 separate individuals from that set, one of them a producer and the other one a runner, came up to me and started talking about Doctor Who because they saw the badge, and unprompted, not knowing that I'm Mr. TARDIS, not knowing I do Doctor Who online, And without me steering the conversation anywhere near that direction, they just went on unprompted, lengthy diatribes on how terrible Empire of Death was. And it was kind of at that point, I was like, Doctor Who's subjective badness, for lack of a better term, has broken containment, and even industry higher-ups like producers and directors are just openly talking about how terrible the show is at this point. Like with the Chris Chibnall era, and I know that series and that era has got a lot of haters. I've got a whole playlist of breaking down just the terrible, horrible, bigoted arguments against that whole era. It obviously had its genuine detractors. But most of the noise was, oh, the show can't work because it's got a woman. There's too many black people. It's secretly run by a Jew. Like, all of this stuff that I've talked about in depth in the past, some of these big figures on YouTube and beyond. A lot of that was just tabloid, reactionary, like, basically echo chamber hate stuff from people who never even watched the show, who have no intention of watching it or engaging with it as a fan. For them, obviously, it did have its genuine detractors, but most of the hate was concentrated into those sectors. But with the Bad Wolf era, that badness had not only broken containment, but they weren't talking about wokeness. They were talking about, no, this was terribly written. This was poorly put together and poorly conceived. I know that a lot of people are putting a lot of flack on Disney, and I'm sorry to go to bat for the multi-billion-dollar corporation. I apologize, but I genuinely don't think that when Bad Wolf made this deal with the BBC and Disney Plus to do this international distribution partnership, I seriously, genuinely doubt that there was a higher-up Disney exec somewhere in America with chomping on a big cigar or whatever. I genuinely doubt there's a Disney executive going, what we need is Sutekh. We need to bring back Susan. We need, no, these mistakes from the Bad Wolf era are uniquely horrible fanboy decisions that only somebody like Russell T Davies or like an equivalent could make. I honestly think that Disney went into the Bad Wolf Doctor Who deal with the intention of making a broadly accessible big sci-fi show for their streaming platform, and what Russell T Davies and Bad Wolf gave them was something like irredeemably poor. Something that was not only inaccessible to newcomers, not only inaccessible to a brand new generation of supposed viewers internationally, but was actively hostile to that audience. What I'm really worried about is that in the grand scheme of the narrative, people are going to take the absolute wrong impression and the wrong lessons to learn from the Bad Wolf era of Doctor Who. Doctor Who did not decline because of supposed wokeness, because the people who make those arguments, they're not watching the show anyway, and literally anything is woke to them. Anything that involves a person of colour or anybody who's LGBTQ+, any involvement is too woke, and that is their threshold. There's no version of Doctor Who made on any era of the show, going back to the 1960s, that would not pass their wokeness check. It doesn't exist. The lesson that needs to be learned from the Bad Wolf era is that for a show like Doctor Who to continue and thrive and succeed, is that you can't keep looking back. You need the fresh blood. You need the people who have something to say with the work that they want to put out into the universe and use Doctor Who to do it. You need these fresh voices. And one reason why I'm not particularly grieving about this current hiatus, Wilderness Years 2 or whatever we're going to call it for Doctor Who, is that personally, I'm already getting that from Big Finish, from the books, from the Penguin audios, from the comic strips. Heck, we've got Circuit Breaker with Joe Martin as the Fugitive Doctor, which is starting in a couple of weeks' time. I'm really looking forward to that. When Doctor Who gets put out for tender later this year, which also, just to clarify, also means that BBC Studios can apply for the franchise again. BBC Studios can internally put in their own pitch so that they can make Doctor Who in-house again if they so choose. You know, you might get companies like Apple or Paramount or Netflix or whoever, or maybe a production house in the UK that's not associated with the streaming service, whoever. We don't know exactly what the parameters of this are going to be exactly, but we do know that BBC Studios, if they want to make it in-house, they can do that again if they want to. Whoever takes over Doctor Who next after Bad Wolf, they need to make sure that it is a proper clean slate. And that's another thing that makes the Russell T Davies announcement here on Instagram make it read as just so oddly passive-aggressive, because the casting of Billie Piper for a last-second regeneration at the end of the reality war, a last Hail Mary to try and save the show, despite it reeking of desperation. And I said this at the time when the reality war broadcast. People are saying, oh, in hindsight, it was a bad idea. No, conceptually, it was a bad idea. You don't need hindsight for that. What Russell T Davies and Bad Wolf had done with Doctor Who, and also having Stephen Moffat come back to write, yeah, Boom was really good. I'll give him credit. Boom was really good. But with the vast majority of scripts from the Bad Wolf era coming from previous showrunners and previous writers of the show, and what we have with the ending of the reality war, and basically just locking in whatever company takes over next with that desperate Billie Piper regeneration that's not remotely thought out, it's the equivalent of pulling the ladder up behind you. Like, it's almost like sabotaging whatever comes next. It's not good producing for a show to basically cut off any creative ambition for whoever comes next. It honestly reads as very selfish, and I'm sorry to say that, but I love Russell T Davies as a writer. I've not watched Tiptoe yet, but I'm looking forward to watching it. But it just reads as really, really callous in terms of like being a caretaker for a show. Whoever takes over next, they need a new creative team. They need people who are not associated with Doctor Who from any era, perhaps with the exception of Sharma Angel Warfall from the Well, because from what I'm hearing behind the scenes from that story, basically it's a really great script, a really great idea that was basically wrenched away from her and made into a midnight sequel from Russell T Davies, and also Inuit elements from the story in the engine. I was saying earlier that Doctor Who's reputation amongst audiences and even people within the media and TV industry in the UK as basically in shambles. It's to shit. However, the story in the engine from Inuit Elms was recently, I think it was like last month, nominated at the 2026 Hugo Awards. Doctor Who, The Story in the Engine, written by Inuit Elms, directed by Michaela McPherson, nominated for Best Dramatic Presentation Short Form at the 2026 Hugo Awards, alongside 2 episodes of Murderbot, Pluribus, Severance, and The Wheel of Time. It's probably not going to win. Pluribus is probably going to take this. Murderbot was alright. I've watched Murderbot. That was pretty good. But the Hugo Awards, these nominees are voted on by their peers in terms of writers and creatives in the genre space. So The Story in the Engine getting a nomination at the Hugo Awards, that does mean something. But whoever takes over Doctor Who next needs that clean slate. That is the priority. I'm seeing a lot of fans upset, and they're saying, oh, we're never going to find out who Billie Piper was playing. We're never going to find out who the boss was. And I'm sorry, folks, are we not picking up on the basic pattern recognition? We weren't going to know who they were because Russell T Davies hadn't figured it out. He hadn't thought about it yet. I guarantee you, inject a truth serum into Russell T Davies and he'll admit that he has no idea who the boss is. I mean, even going back to Mrs. Flood, you watch The Church on Ruby Road up until Empire of Death, that's obviously not the Rani. Russell T Davies doesn't know who Mrs. Flood is yet. It's not until he gets to the writing of the end of Series 2 that he decides, oh, this is going to be the Rani. Like, he's coming up with these ideas and these mystery boxes without even knowing until close to opening them what they're gonna be. Like, I don't care who the boss is, because it was just going to be another classic series element, because that's what everyone else was in this series. You know, the one who waits, the one beneath, and Mrs. It was all glup shittos from the classic series. Like, the boss was going to be the same. I tell you who I feel sorry for, though. Carole Ann Ford. She finally comes back to the TV series after 60 years to wrap up this very lengthy story of her and her grandfather, the Doctor, and one of the last things that she gets to do in the TV series, one of her last contributions to the role that she's primarily known for, is pleading with the Doctor to stop torturing the allegory for a Palestinian, and the Doctor just flat out ignores her. Genuinely, what a fucking mess. And it's not woke that's caused this, okay? It's not. It just flat out isn't, folks, okay? It's fanboy brain, and it's also the need to turn everything into, quote, content. You just hope it will generate content. Well, with Russell T Davies in Tiptoe, he's got his content, okay? This was him on Instagram a couple of days ago, celebrating that Melba's speech in Tiptoe got 2.5 million views on Channel 4's Instagram. There you go, Russell. Tiptoe generated you content. I'm genuinely, I hope you're happy. You know, it sounds so passive aggressive. I'm sorry. I genuinely hope you're happy that you got your content, okay? But don't approach Doctor Who like that. Please don't. And that's not even getting into just the really questionable morals of some of the episodes under the Bad Wolf era. And I think that a big part of it is that Russell T Davies as a person has really changed, between 2003 and 2023. In the parting of the ways, Rose is like, you don't just let things happen, you take a stand, you say no. However, we've got stories at 73 Yards, The War Between the Land and the Sea, and the Interstellar Song Contest. All three of these stories have our main character passively observe or sometimes even engage in acts of horrible corruption and brutality and abuse, despite being the person who is most well positioned to stop all of that stuff from happening and just not doing it. And the episode just doesn't seem to even remotely acknowledge that that's happened. Like, something kind of morally has really infiltrated Russell T Davies's work in the past 20 years. And that's quite concerning. So by the end of the year, the BBC are going to put Doctor Who out to competitive tender, so I'm sure there'll be a press statement announcing that, and then we'll have some results from that, or the outcome from that, and maybe as early as the end of 2026 or the start of 2027, who knows? Like I said, there was a 6-month gap from the CBeebies announcement to Blue Zoo Animation winning the pitch, and from what I've been hearing from some people I know over at Blue Zoo, this is going to be something pretty special. I know it's a CBeebies animation, but I'm hearing really positive things about this. I genuinely can't wait to see this in 2027. Like I said, we've got Circuit Breaker dropping in a few weeks' time. We've got Big Finish who are continuing to do really great stuff as well. So Doctor Who as a franchise is not going anywhere, but the TV side of things, the main, public-facing side of things, is taking a rest for a while. I even did a tweet about this the other day. I think the best thing for the show at this point, even before this announcement, was to have a controlled break for a couple of years, maybe 3 to 4 years, for it to, allow audiences to actually miss it once again. It's basically a collective fandom story at this point, but, everyone talks about how they force their families to watch the Christmas special, and then it's inevitably terrible and embarrassing. And we can't keep doing this as a franchise, man. We can't keep putting our worst foot forward every Christmas and hoping that we're able to somehow salvage a franchise like this. It's been like this for over 10 years. The Doctor Who Christmas specials, apart from arguably the Church on Ruby Road, and even the New Year's Day specials from Jodie Whittaker, which were pretty well received, all things considered, put those to one side, and the Doctor Who Christmas specials have been routinely quite embarrassing. So have a controlled pause of the franchise for a couple of years. I know people will say, if you stop Doctor Who, there's no guarantee that it's going to come back. And yeah, that is absolutely true. But I do now think that Doctor Who, compared to 1989, is now in a much healthier position in terms of a global brand, where it really is kind of too big to stop at this point, where it makes far too much money for the BBC and BBC Studios, where I think they genuinely do have an investment in making more of it, whereas in the late 80s, early 90s, the BBC had no intention and had like no interest in making it anymore. That is thankfully not the case. So I think an actual pause allow audiences to miss it once again. And honestly, this is going to sound so harsh, do get the stench of the Bad Wolf era out of the air. Crack a window for a bit, because honestly, the reputation amongst Doctor Who with general audiences and even the fans at this point, because of primarily the Bad Wolf era, you need audiences to sort of distance themselves from that for a bit. And I think a couple of years, considering how fast the public realm and news and everything, considering how fast everything moves nowadays, 3 or 4 years, it probably is a good pausing point for Doctor Who. If you can make it shorter, great, but what I think just needs to happen is a controlled pause, and hopefully with this competitive tender offer, and hopefully another company will pick it up, potentially even BBC Studios themselves once again, we will have that pause. And I think that what's frustrating is that because of Russell T Davies's and Bad Wolf's Hail Mary desperation casting of Billie Piper a year ago, that competitive tender offer could have been done a year ago, but we've had to put it off. And even Disney are not wanting to broadcast The War Between the Land and the Sea, which got higher viewing figures than the previous season of Doctor Who, probably because it was so in the marketing disassociated from Doctor Who at this point. That was how poor the reputation of the show was. When you've got Ncuti Gatwa mocking the show on Saturday Night Live, and yeah, it's a joke, but every joke does have a basis in reality, folks. Russell T Davies and Bad Wolf are now no longer involved in Doctor Who, and it's being put out for tender, and hopefully by the end of the year we'll have an update on that. But honestly, I just wish that Doctor Who, with the reality war, with the past 2 seasons of the show and the ending of the War Between the Land and the Sea, I just really wish that the show didn't have to hit rock bottom in order to get to this point. This is something that probably should have happened over a year ago. As for the future of the Mr. TARDIS channel, I'm not planning on going anywhere. I still haven't done my season 2 reviews, and I'm honestly in no big rush to revisit those stories. But in terms of like the actual quote content that has been, most viewed on my channel, it hasn't actually been the modern contemporary stuff. Like my reviews on season 1, 14,000 views, 12,000 views, boom, less than 8,000, 73 yards, 11,000, Dot and Bubble, 8,000, Rogue, 4,000. But then you get to my Hartnell Marathon, and yes, these have been out for longer, but these are much older black and white episodes, and 21,000, 26,000 for Marco Polo, 21,000 for the Keys of Marinus, 20,000 for the Sensorites, 18,000 for the Reign of Terror. Like, as far as I'm concerned, the data shows that it's not really going to impact my channel at all, which I think is just once again indicative of the poor state of the franchise outside of the TV show, like how it's perceived by audiences, and how little actual engagement there is. I remember that Josh Snares did a video talking about like the return of Susan and theorizing all of this stuff, generating content like Rusty Davis wanted them to do, and then they were just not rewarded for it, like in the actual story itself. Like, yeah, it's not good, folks. It's not good. So it's basically just going to be business as usual for the Mr. TARDIS channel. So make sure you subscribe for all of that good stuff. I am going to be away for a couple of weeks because I'm away down south for another TV job, which is annoying. But it's also my birthday this month, so you can't get mad at me. If you want to do anything for my birthday, then become a patron, become a YouTube member, and subscribe and hit the like button and all that good stuff. And it really, really does help me out. I've got an Amazon wish list in the description below if you want to get me anything for my birthday. I'd really appreciate that as a little birthday boy. But that's it. That's confirmation. We are in the Doctor Who wilderness years. And to quote Inua Ellams quoting Ernest Hemingway in The Story in the Engine, I'm born, I die, I'm born. I'll see you folks next time.